How you guys doing this morning? Well, we get to talk about pee first thing in the morning. Is there anything better than that? I don't think so. For you guys who are unfamiliar, my name is Lukas Shaw. I'm an account manager for Clean Fleet. I have, over the past 2 years, acquired a bunch of knowledge about the industry, as well as specifically the DOT Drug Testing Clearinghouse, which we will be getting to later today. And basically, Clean Fleet is a third-party administrator. We've been providing services for drug testing for over 20 years, and we can help you set up a lot of solutions for your drug testing problems across the country. So let's get into some regulatory stuff. Positivity rate for drug testing is drastically increasing. For 2019, FTA and USCG are increasing the rates to 50% to match with PHMSA and FRA. Currently, FAA and FMCSA are not changing. They're still going to remain at 25% for the foreseeable future. You probably should say what those acronyms are. US. Oh yeah, U.S. Coast Guard and Federal Transport Administration. Yeah, buses, stuff like that. Yeah, and positive rates have been going up pretty consistently. We'll have some data that will show, but also Quest, one of the largest laboratories in the country, has been showing a steady increase in positivity rates. You're also seeing some increase in marijuana positivity rates from the states that are legalizing marijuana. Just as a side note, the fact that the FAA and the FMCSA have not increased their rates is either a sign that the drug testing programs are working amazing, or that these two modes have some of the largest and most active industry groups lobbying against increasing the rates. So, in terms of some statistics, again, we're seeing a slight increase. You can see 2016, we've seen about an 18% increase in 2018 from 0.94 to 1.11. Again, once it gets over 1%, the rate should be going up. And we've seen positive rates above 1% for 2 straight years. For non-DOT, again, you're seeing an increase. It's about 9%, going from 5.31 to 5.80. So, in terms of what we're seeing being tested positive for, about half of our positive tests are for marijuana, which is to be expected. We're seeing increases in cocaine and opioids, and decrease in amphetamines. I'm not sure why we're seeing that. Consistently, the DEA has said that methamphetamine is the primary drug risk for Oregon and Washington. They've been saying that for the past 3 years. So to see a decrease in the positivity rate is unusual. The increase in opioids, I think, is a correction. Obviously, we've been going through this opioid crisis since about 2015, but it was mostly centered on the East Coast and Midwest, and I think we're starting to see some of the effects coming to the West Coast. So overall, rates are generally up. Marijuana is still the most abused drug, and it is still the one that we're catching the most people for. Some information. If you guys are in a DOT mode, then you're well aware that over the past year, you have probably noticed a change in the drug testing panel. It's because over this past year, they added some semi-synthetic opioids, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, oxycodone, oxymorphone. If you have not evaluated your drug and alcohol policy to make sure that these changes are reflected in it, I would recommend doing so. The DOT is not requiring changes, but there may be certain language that you've chosen to use in your policy that may need to be updated to reflect this change. Some changing, We have now entered our 10th state that is legalized recreational marijuana. Essentially the entire West Coast, much of the Northeast Seaboard, and a couple of states in the Southwest. So it's 10 and 2 DC, and then the North Mariana Islands. 47 of the 50 states now have some sort of access for marijuana products. The only 3 that do not have any access laws right now are Idaho, South Dakota, and Nebraska. And Nebraska has decriminalized marijuana. So pretty much everywhere now has some form of marijuana products available. Laws vary from state to state. If you are operating in multiple states, again, I would consider evaluating your policy. If you have drivers based in one state and drivers based in another state, if they are non-covered employees, that's going to be the thing that you want to address. Because marijuana is still illegal at the federal level, it is still considered a Class 1 drug, and for high risk of abuse and no specific medical treatment. It's still legal on the federal level. So if you have covered employees, they shouldn't be using marijuana products whatsoever. If you're non-covered employees, you want to make sure and update your policies to reflect what you're dealing with in individual states. Yeah. So again, those are the states. This is a different one. Some regulatory stuff. One thing the Trump administration has done is made this part of the presentation super easy. So October 24th, 2018, Congress passed a bill. Essentially, they want to get an update on the way things are going in the drug testing world. They wanted an update on making the MIS information public. That's the information that you submit to the federal government in regards to drug testing, how many drug tests you've done in a year, how many pre-employments, what people tested positive for, that sort of thing. They want to make that information public. That's the information they use to determine what the testing level is. So we'll be able to have access to that information. They asked for an update in 60 days, and the government shut down, so we don't have an update. Same with hair testing. That's going to be probably coming in the next 3 to 5 years. The HHS is still trying to evaluate the process for testing, looking at some rules changes, stuff like that. But again, Congress asked for an update in 60 days, and we have no update because the government shut down. Oral and saliva testing, this is going to be coming very soon, probably within the next 2 years. It is already offered as an option for some confirmatory testing for medical review officers, but I think you'll start to see it more widely used. HHS is already in the final rules process, so that should be coming imminently. And again, they asked for an update. Again, there is no update. Lastly, they asked for an update on what's going on with the clearinghouse. That is supposed to be active January 1, 2020. Me and Brian went to an event earlier this year, had ODAPSI there, had one of the FMCSA administrators that's in charge of this there. I questioned her for a good 25 minutes. They seem like they're still ready to go. They are not seeking any private bids for creating the system. They're doing it all in-house, and apparently it is on schedule. But I honestly cannot fathom that being the case. We've received no additional information, and with less than a year, you'd expect there to be something by now. So again, Congress specifically asked for an update, and because of the shutdown, we don't have it. So we're starting to see some changes in regards to getting results in. As I mentioned before, we added 4 drugs to the drug testing panel and removed 1. Of the 4 drugs that we've added, a lot of them are commonly prescribed drugs that people take for chronic pain. Because of the additional drugs that we're testing for, labs are having to test the result multiple times to confirm that a metabolite is present. So usually, the lab gets the specimen, they test it. Usually you're looking at 24 hours, maybe 48 to test it twice, and then the lab result goes to the MRO. What we're seeing now is the specimen being tested 3 times at a minimum. So labs are wanting to be absolutely sure that the specimen that they have is positive for metabolite. We had one instance where a specimen was tested 6 times. So labs are really concerned about this. They want to make sure that they get it right the first time. So again, they're testing it 3 times. I said that first test takes 24 hours. Next 2 also take 24 hours each. So the window that we've been discussing before of 24 to 48 hours to get results really is expanding to between 72 hours and 96 hours for getting a result. Included in that is the fact that if they do find something, it has to go to a medical review officer. The medical review officer needs to confirm that positive test result, and they need to contact the employee to do that. There have been some changes in that process, giving medical review officers a little bit more leeway in how they communicate and defining a time limit for contacting employees. But if your employees are not providing accurate information, and if the chain of custodies that you're having your employees use don't have accurate information for you, then they're having difficulties getting in touch with people. And that, again, can extend that process. They need a minimum 5 days to try to get a hold of you. So you should be making sure that your employees are providing up-to-date information on the CCFs, and make sure that the CCFs that you're supplying to your collection sites have your updated information on there. As well, some of you that actually look day-to-day at CCFs may have noticed that there are some changes to them, including the additional drugs on there. You might have noticed that some sections have been removed. For the past 6 months, you should be using new CCFs. If you're not, you're going to see delays. Labs will not test results that don't have the new CCF. They will request an addenda from the collection site, and 9 times out of 10, they require a wet signature. So that means that they are faxing the collection site, saying you need to send us an original signed copy saying that you guys have done this, and then that has to come back to the laboratory before they'll test it. That can add another 48 hours, especially if the collection site is sending this information via a courier as opposed to sending it direct mail. Either way, you're really messing with your timeline if you don't have up-to-date CCFs. Now, in going with this, you should be using ECCF. Basically, for a little over 3 years now, the DOT has allowed electronic chains of custodies to be used. What's great about these is that when there's an update, you don't have to worry about updating sending new chains to your site because it'll be done automatically. So, if you have an ECCF account, there are 2 primary ECCF vendors right now. FormFox, which is what Clean Fleet uses, and I'm fairly certain Quest or eScreen has another ECCF format. But try to get on those. Again, that information updates automatically. The CCFs are much clearer. Everything's typed out. You don't have to worry about like errors and writing. And they require a step-by-step process to be filled out so you can guarantee that things will not be missed. Again, Cleveland Fleet is trying to lead the charge here. We've been contacting collection sites directly to make sure that they have ECCF capabilities, and as well using those sites as primary sites. So if you want to avoid the problem of chains being updated, which more than likely we're probably going to see an update in the next 2 years to CCF again, either adding fentanyl, maybe removing NDA, maybe putting in an option for oral swab collection. You're not going to have to worry about that if you're using ECCF. But with all things with technology, there are some problems. It's still not 100% figured out. There are occasionally errors where when you initially print it to get a signature, it doesn't print. Then you reprint it again. That document says duplicate on it most frequently. The lab won't take that. So make sure that you, one, are using collection sites that are aware that this error might occur and that are trained on the process for correcting it. Most oftentimes, all they need is just an addenda that's right there that that person can sign and just say, this is the original, it didn't print. Super easy, adds maybe 30, 40 seconds to the collection process. Overall, again, the ECCF is going to be a lot easier for you to deal with in the long run. But again, sometimes those errors happen. It's just the way technology goes. But if you have switched to ECCF and you're still noticing delays, this is most likely why. So make sure you have conversations with your collection sites. Make sure you have conversations with the third-party administrators that you're using to make sure that these sort of corrections are happening promptly. So, Drug and Alcohol Testing Clearinghouse. Like I said, it's supposed to be active January 6, 2020. It is a tool for employers to ensure that the employees that they are hiring and are employing are compliant with DOT drug and alcohol testing rules. It has a couple of functions. The first function is what is essentially called a full query or an initial query. This will give you, as an employer, an insight of the drug testing information for the past 5 years for an employee. It'll provide all the information for positives. It'll provide all the information for dilutes. It will provide information for reasonable cause, all that jazz. There's a whole bunch of information that's going to be available to you as an employer if it's there. If not, you'll just get it bounced back and they'll say, hey, there's nothing there. That way you know that you're working with a good employee. There's also another function that's called, I would call it a limited query. Essentially, this is just, is there information out there? It's not going to tell you specifically what's out there, but you put in the employee's information and it just bounces the system and it's like, okay, is there anything there? If there's nothing there, it bounces back, there's nothing there. If there is something there, it'll say, there is something there you need to look at. At that point, then you need to do a full query. So in getting ready for that, there's essentially like 4 things you really need to be doing. The first thing is making sure that your ID numbers and your CDL numbers for your employees are up to date, because those are likely going to be the identification numbers for these employees. There is going to be still a requirement for you to do the background checks that you're doing now, contacting previous employers. You're going to need to do that still for 3 years. After 3 years, you can just use this. But making sure that information is up to date, because that will be primarily how you search for your employees. Again, when I questioned the FMCSA administrator about this, they were not clear as to what information is going to be used. HHS has recommended not using social security numbers, so we know it's not going to be socials, So driver's license numbers seems like the logical step, especially because they're going to be working in partner with state driving license authorities, but we don't know. Maybe they'll just have random assigned ID numbers. I'm not 100% sure. You want to start changing your pre-employment information to include permission for an initial query. Before you hire an employee, the new rule now is that you have to have done a full query on them to see if there's information out there on them. So in your pre-employment information, you're going to need to include a waiver or some document that says you are giving us as an employer permission to look up your information in the Drug and Alcohol Testing Clearinghouse. Now, I think in a perfect world, the FMCSA is imagining a system where this is all done digitally. So you as an employer will go into the website, put in the employee's information, and say, hey, I want to do a full query on them. The system processes that, notifies the driver. Driver says, someone wants to do a full query on you. You need to give permission. Driver gives permission. That is, I think, their ideal. As we are all aware, this industry has some struggles with technology and has some struggles with drivers wanting to get involved in technology. So there may be some things that you'll want to talk about directly with your staff. Maybe on that initial full query, you have a document that you can upload directly up to the website to give you permission. And then for those drivers who are not technology adept, the website does have something built in, supposedly, that will send certified mail to a driver to give permission if they don't have email or a phone. As well, as part of that pre-employment information, you probably need to include some documentation for a partial, or the limited query as well. So if you have this document, and this for sure you're going to need, because this limited query needs to be done annually. So having that document on file, again, the FMCSA has not given specific detail about what needs to be included in it. They've just said that for a limited query, you can have just an affidavit signed on file from your driver. So you'll want to include that then in your new employee handbooks as something that's like, cool, here's our drug and alcohol testing policy. I need this document, I need this document signed that says that you're giving us permission for annually. Whenever you decide to do it, if you decide to do it January 1, if you decide to do it December 31, if you decide to do it on their hire date, whatever, that annually we're going to have permission to search your information for limited query. You'll need to include that probably in your new hire information. And then make sure that when you do hire an employee that is on a follow-up program, that you request directly from their previous employer what their follow-up testing program is. That will not be available on the clearinghouse. It will just say that they're on a follow-up program. It will still say that they're eligible, but there will still be that information there that says this person tested positive, this person completed a return to duty process, they're eligible, but they still have a follow-up program. So again, changes to your hiring information, making sure you're training your DERs. There is an important thing they need to mention in terms of actual knowledge. This is a strange part of the regulation that is definitely going to need some more definitions. So make sure that you're training your employees on what those definitions are. And then for your drivers out there, you want to make sure to be prepared to use your CDL number as opposed to your social. And as well, that you are giving permission for queries and are aware that if you refuse to give consent, you cannot perform safety-sensitive functions. It's already in the regulation that if you do, as an employer, do a limited query, you have to do a full query in 24 hours. If you don't, that driver's got to be pulled. No ifs, ands, or buts. So if you're dealing with a driver, you do a limited query, they're out on the road, and they do not get permission in 24 hours, they are not allowed to perform safety-sensitive functions. So they need to stop until they can give you permission to actually look up and find the information out there. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so currently we're supposed to require back to 3 years, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, we're going to have a 5-year history.
In the clearinghouse, yes.
Yes. So is Kevin here? I'm wondering what the legal implications are if you have a driver now who in the 5-year history was positive.
So,
Are they going to change the 3-year requirement?
no, I doubt it. This is kind of what I would say is the federal government essentially admitting the fact that people are cheating and saying, okay, everyone gets a clean slate starting in 2020, and everything that happened beforehand doesn't really count. Because if you're doing your due diligence and contacting previous employers, you should be getting this information, and then when this clearinghouse is active, you'll be able to report it. But if the employee is not sharing the proper information with you, is not allowing you to do your due diligence and do your job properly, there's not a lot you can do about it. There's not a lot the federal government can do about it. They can't, well, they could, but they won't go around demanding that every single employer provide them with detailed information about every positive. It's hard enough for them to get MIS information, and that document takes 60 seconds for you to make, and the rate for receiving that is less than 10% for FMCSA. So even if they requested that information, they never get it. Essentially, they're saying everyone starts fresh, 2020, that's when this is really going to go hard and this is really going to go into effect. So again, you'll need to do your due diligence through 2023, still contacting previous employers, still trying to get as much information as you can. 2023 rolls around, unless there's an update, which I doubt there will be, then you can not do that background check anymore, and then there should be enough information on the clearinghouse for you to search. Any other questions? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, that is super loud and I can't hear you. Hold on. That would have been bad.
This limited employer drone operators, do we have to do that? This, drone operators, we have to do this limited inquiry for owner operators.
That is an excellent question. So, as an owner operator, you probably need to treat it kind of like you would the fact that an owner operator can't be in charge of their own follow-up program. As an owner operator, the TPA is going to take on a lot of those responsibilities. So again, this is
We're with Clean Fleet.
right. So Clean Fleet is going to be taking those responsibilities for essentially as we become aware of this, as we become aware of the rules. TPAs, as well as MROs and labs and substance abuse professionals, are going to register with the clearinghouse. Then you, as an employer, or let's say you specifically as an owner-operator, are also going to have to register with the clearinghouse. Then, once you've registered, you can give permission to us as Clean Fleet to act as the person that's responsible for the query information. So we will, and I haven't talked to Brian about this, about how we're going to process this, but essentially we could do something along the lines of, okay, when you have your yearly renewal, let's say that you signed up in May. We're going to send out your renewal in May, and then we're also going to do a limited query right then. The FMCSA is anticipating offering some sort of discount for bulk. I think their estimate was somewhere around $10 per query, but I mean, that probably is going to go down since literally everyone has to do this. But yeah, as an owner operator, the third-party administrator will have that responsibility delegated from you to us. Okay. And again, if you have TPAs, you're going to need to go on to the clearinghouse and give them permission. We're going to also be making some changes in our new company information, basically providing what our registration information is, so that when you register with the clearinghouse, you can just put that in right away. It's like, this is the third-party administrator that's going to be responsible for handling our drug and alcohol testing information. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're saying essentially the first 3 years of the program is going to be useless. I mean, they're going to be collecting data.
Well, yes, it's going to be, so in the first 3 years, it's going to make your job harder because you're going to have to do both.
So it's going to be mandatory that we do a query?
Yes. The first 3 years, it's mandatory that you do a query and you're doing an employee background thing. Because again, imagine this situation. You have an employee, let's say in 2022, that tests positive on a pre-employment drug screen. They don't have to tell you. They should. I mean, let me take that back. They do need to tell you, but they didn't necessarily work for that company. So they don't need to include that in that employment information. Now, that company has to report that positive to the clearinghouse.
And that's the problem we see now is somebody works for somebody for 6 months, he just puts down he was unemployed.
Right, exactly. And
you don't catch that.
yeah, and I mean, essentially, that's exactly what this was made for. You know, this clearinghouse came out of an Arkansas situation where a bus driver was high out of his mind, got in an accident, and killed like 5 or 6 kids or something. And they were like, how, like, he was doing a drug testing program. No one knew. Well, he tried getting jobs with other companies and kept failing those pre-employments. His name never got called on a random, which is totally possible, but he kept failing pre-employments working for other companies and no one knew because he didn't report it even though he was required to do it. So this, again, as I mentioned, is going to be a tool. And for that first 3 years, while they're building as much information as possible, you're still going to be required to do both. But it's only going to benefit you. Because if you're doing a background check and contacting previous employers and everything looks great there, but then you find out that, hey, this guy's been trying to get a different job for a while, tested positive for a couple other companies, now he's trying to work for me, nah. Now you've got that information there, so you can protect your assets.
Now, how is the FMCSA going to compel, say, smaller companies, 4 or 5 trucks, to report this information? I mean, are they going to do this through their audits and say, well, you show that this guy had logged, say, this guy logged in your system here, in your ELDs, but we don't show him in the system. I mean, do you know, how are they going to compel people to do this?
How are they going to compel people to
companies to do this, yeah.
So the enforcement mechanisms, I'm not 100% aware of, but essentially it'll probably go along something like this, where just like they do your audits and try to make sure that you've done pre-employment drug screens, they'll do the same thing as like, did you do a pre-employment query? Where's the results for that? You don't have those results? Did you do one? No, you didn't do one? Okay, then there's going to be penalties. Okay? It's probably in a similar vein. And in terms of like reporting the information, this information is going to be super easy to report. Once you've registered with the clearinghouse, which all of you are going to have to do, that there is no exception. If you are governed by the FMCSA mode, you have to register with the clearinghouse. And then you have an employee that tests positive, you've got to report that information. And then on the back end again with the audit, they might be like, okay, I'm looking at your MIS report, I noticed you have a positive test result, but you haven't reported anything to the clearinghouse. Why didn't you do that? So again, there are those mechanisms there, those regulatory enforcement mechanisms that are still going to be present. Yes, Heather.
In addition to that, the MROs are also going to be responsible for reporting this information as well to the clearinghouse. So you as the employer and the MRO are jointly going to be reporting this information.
Can you repeat that answer?
Right. So what Heather said is that medical review officers also have to register in the clearinghouse. Like I said, everybody's got to register. They also have to report this information. All right. I'm being told to wrap up. So if you have additional questions, I'll be over there. But thank you guys for your attention. You guys have a great rest of your morning.